Mr. Clark's back. Time to take a look at the American Revolutionary War, 12.5. I would hope that the American Revolution is something that you have a good frame of reference about already throughout many of the different years that you've had social studies throughout elementary and middle school. Some of the key objectives that we'll look at as we move into 12.5 will be how Great Britain became a global or world power. The American colonies are going to be a foundation for a lot of their financial achievements and a lot of the positive things they're going to accomplish during the 1700s. We're going to understand the events and ideas that eventually would lead up to the American Revolutionary War, including the impact the Enlightenment had. And that's one of the reasons why we use the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution as kind of a couple foundation discussions that we had and a couple foundation topics for understanding absolutism and this era here of revolution. We'll look at the key events in the American Revolution. We'll identify the political and legal ideas in the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution that are still the foundations of the American society today. Okay, question one is kind of a speculation question. As if you were a member of the British Parliament in the 1760s, would you have supported British King George III's attempt to consolidate power? You could support the king in his attempt to control national affairs. You might be really patriotic. You might be really loyal to the crown and to the king, and that might be a reason why you might support anything that the king might do. Others, however, might believe the parliament should have a stronger voice and kind of limit the power of the king. The parliament did represent the people as they had the House of Lords and the House of Commons, with the House of Commons electing regular people to positions of authority within the government. Two, why was mercantilism a key component of British colonization in America? And before we look specifically at that particular topic, keep in mind that mercantilism is a key factor in all countries' colonial ideas and goals. The conquering powers, whether it's Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, or the Dutch, all these countries are going into other places for profit's sake. They're not looking to make friends necessarily. They're not looking to take care of the people. In some cases, they bring with them, Christianity and modern education and things like that. But generally speaking, they're there for their own purposes, their own profits, and not necessarily looking at the best interest of the people. They're there to exploit and use the people for their own financial gain. So mercantilism means the use of laws and policies by a nation to strictly control trade and other aspects of the colonial economy. When you look here for the British, they pretty much exploited the American colonies for their own profits. Three, why do you think the Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality had a major impact on the American colonists when they declared themselves independent of Great Britain? Liberty and equality were essential in the colonies because the Americans believed their rights as English citizens were being trampled or stomped on because decisions were being made about their future, even though they had no representation in Parliament. No taxation without representation became a colonial rallying cry during this period of time in history. Okay, moving on to question 4. What made the Declaration of Independence such a radical document? Well, eventually, over the course of time, there's a wide variety of different things that were going on in the American colonies beyond taxation, what was representation. You had a period of time where the British soldiers were forced to be housed in colonial homes. It was called the Quartering Act. This meant that British redcoats or British troops would be allowed to live in your house, and you had to provide them room and board for free. The rationale was they were providing protection for the colonies, and therefore you had to do your part by putting them up in your house. Other issues during this period of time included the Boston Massacre. That was when a bunch of colonial citizens, American colonists, began tossing snowballs and rocks at some British soldiers, and they opened fire on the crowd. killing several people, and the colonists use this as a motivating factor, almost like propaganda, to kind of overemphasize or exaggerate a little bit the impact of it. We had the Boston Tea Party, where the colonial citizens demonstrated by going onto a British ship and dumped their tea into the harbor in Boston. We had Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which was a pamphlet that was circulated throughout the colonies that indicated the common sense reasons, the kind of the logical reasons why the American colonists should fight for independence. So you see a little visual of the Declaration of Independence. It was announced to the world, as we go into number 4, on July 4th, 1776. America announced it was separating from Great Britain, one of the world's most powerful empires. It also addressed the king's failure to ease subjects' grievances, meaning listen to or do anything about them. It also issued a landmark decree that all men are created equal. They had certain natural rights that the government could not take away. So once again, this goes back to the Enlightenment. John Locke, his ideas were key to some of the colonial grievances and some of the things here that they're kind of declaring about their natural rights that the government should protect, not take away. 5, if you were a colonial merchant in 1776, would you have supported the Declaration of Independence? Well, it's kind of a difficult question here. You would think logically everybody wanted to be free and independent, but the financial difficulties that an armed conflict could present for a business, or the financial difficulties caused by a high tax on the goods that you sell, can be problematic for a merchant. So some merchants might not have supported revolution or the Declaration of Independence. Others, no matter how it might have negatively impacted your businesses, some colonial citizens believe they deserve representation and independence from Great Britain. So it kind of depended upon your perspective. If you put what you thought was just and right first, then you might support fighting back and the revolution, the Declaration of Independence. If you put your financial interests first, and the idea that you did not want to lose any profit or money, you might feel inclined to be, if you didn't want to lose money, you might be opposed to the Declaration of Independence. However, if you put the interest of the colonies first and you wanted independence, you would not worry about your financial outcome for you. 6, in what ways did the French help the Americans against the British? Well, the French played a key role. They waited to see if the American colonists did well initially with some of their initial fights against the British. So once they noticed that the American colonists were doing reasonably well, they decided they would then support the United States in their revolution. They supported the revolution by providing the Americans with money, supplies, weapons, and later on support with the army, and in particular the French Navy, which you can see in the visual on the left. The French Navy was essential to the colonial victory at the Battle of Yorktown in Virginia, and that's an image on the right there. You can see the French Navy's coming, basically providing a blockade at Yorktown, which prevented the British from resupplying their troops, and Yorktown would be one of the final battles there that allowed for the Americans to defeat the British in one of the biggest upsets in the history of warfare. Seven, how did the ideas of the Enlightenment impact the American Constitution and the U.S. Bill of Rights? The ideals of the Enlightenment created on individual rights or centered on individual rights, freedoms, and liberty. So individual rights, and, when you think about even the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, right to own a gun or to protect yourself. So a lot of these different freedoms and liberties are protected in the Constitution. As a result, the United States Constitution eventually contained the Bill of Rights, guaranteeing to its citizens certain rights that the government could not abridge or take away. The Enlightenment ideals also espoused ideas of self-government, which are also outlined in our American Constitution. Explain why the U.S. Constitution has been called a progressive document. The U.S. Constitution gave the United States a popularly elected government, a model that other nations would adopt. We are a democratic republic. Our republic allows for us to vote for people to represent us in government. We have the executive branch, we vote for the president. We have the Congress, members of the House of Reps and the Senate who we vote for, who represent us and make laws for our country. These laws are supposed to be passed for the common good. And of course, that's not always the case, but generally speaking, that's what it's supposed to do. The document also contained the Bill of Rights, which put into words the rights that government could not take away. How does the United States government function as a federal government? We have shared powers. Powers divided between federal, state, and local governments. Within the federal government, citizens elect representatives who vote and make decisions on behalf of the people. What do you think the term oppressive regimes means? Why did American colonists view the king and parliament as an oppressive regime? Oppressive means cruel, harsh, domineering. Regimes reference governments, but usually like kind of a negative slant towards them. Governments that curtail or take away civil rights and treat their people, especially political opponents, harshly, are considered oppressive regimes. American colonists felt that the British king and parliament were oppressing them. And then finally, the lesson reflection lists the reasons why the United States government and Constitution has stood the test of time. Well, we have the different branches of government, of course, that allows or prevents any one power from becoming too powerful, one branch becoming too powerful. Checks and balances. For example, a law is passed by Congress. There's checks and balances. So after the House of Reps and Senate, they make a law. It goes to the president, who could veto or reject that law and send it back to the Congress, or can sign it into law. And once that bill is signed into law by the president, then the Supreme Court, which is our third branch, can check and see if that law is constitutional or not. And hence we have checks and balances. And constitutional amendments, which have been passed since the establishment of our country, has allowed for us to add to the Constitution when necessary. That'll pretty much wrap up our discussion of the American Revolution. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion of the American Revolution. Until next time, Mr. Clark is out.